What's there to be said about Super Mario that hasn't been said already? That was a genuine question, eh, takers in the audience? You wanna know a video that's hard to write? A video that everyone's already made? You wanna know what's even harder to write than that? A video that everyone's already made on one of the most popular games of all time. I'm not gonna sit here and explain Mario to you, and I'm not gonna tell you about Mario 64, one of the most impactful and revolutionary games ever made, contender for the best game of all time, allegedly. I have a lot of memories of this game, kind of. I am a child of the Nintendo DS, so my first experience knowing what the number 64 feels like was with the handheld remake, which is a whole can of worms in of itself, but it has given me a bit of nostalgia for Mario 64 in a secondhand smoke kind of way. My first time playing actual Mario 64 was way later on an emulator for a playthrough on a YouTube channel that's long been dead and buried, so don't go looking for it. Playing 64 DS first and working your way back is probably the funniest way to go about things because the castle is mostly the same, but it'll be the most random rooms that got overhauled, and it's the closest you can get to feeling like a game's gaslighting you. Just a forewarning, I'll be skipping a lot of pretense on the surface level stuff because I don't think we need a giant seminar for things like how the story is Bowser taking over Peach's castle, kidnapping her and trapping all of its toads inside while sending his minions to all the worlds in the castle's portraits, having Mario collect power stars to open new areas so we can beat Bowser and save the princess. See, that was so much faster than my usual plot summaries. Even if I do want to quickly move past a lot of the obvious or regularly discussed material, which yes, I know is ironic to be doing after deciding to make a video on Super Mario 64, but there is one thing I think can never be overstated. Now, let's make something clear that I feel a lot of people forget. This wasn't the first 3D platformer. There were a couple of other attempts in the years leading up to this. The most well-known is probably Jumping Flash for PS1, and it's a fun game in its own right, but it definitely isn't the first thing that comes to mind when you think 3D platformer, given its weird little first-person setup. That being said, 64 was gonna do the impossible. We're gonna take this and make it go that way, and we're gonna do it without any sort of compromises. As stated before, I primarily grew up in that Wii and DS era, and while I did have my share of mind-blowing experiences like seeing 3D games be played on a handheld, or getting my first HD console, I wish I could have been alive for when this dropped, because witnessing the birth of 3D platformers firsthand must have been unrivaled. You also gotta figure how much of a task this was for the developers, not only in figuring out how do I make Mario go forward when he's only ever known left and right, but also, and probably more pressing in my mind, how do you make levels when the amount of things a player can do at any time has been increased by an unbelievable amount? If I'm standing here, what do you think I'm gonna do right now? Nobody ever uses that move, but they had to be ready in case someone did. That's probably a big reason why the Mario format was changed with the Dimensional Leap. Instead of getting to the end of a bunch of stages, it was about being set loose in a few open maps to grab collectibles. It was far easier at the time to make 15 content-packed levels as opposed to 32 linear ones, and that's on top of it being simpler to account for what a player wants to do, the more space there is to work with, and easier to make sure each level accommodates a player's movement, the less of them you have to refine. Why is this so important? We'll get there. First, let's reel things back a bit. The central focus of this game is collecting power stars. There's 7 of them in each level, and they open doors in the castle that let you go to a new place and continue the cleanup process. Every so often, you get special levels that lead up to a fight with Bowser, and the castle itself has a bunch of stars hidden in secret levels, or given to you through some NPCs, be it Toads or my beloved Mips. Look at how stupid he is. Why wasn't he in Mario Kart World? You're telling me a snowman was more important than God's favorite rabbit? I love you so much, I think I'll take you to hell with me. Progression is gated by 8, 30, 50, and 70 star doors, with all stars being equal in value. I'll give Mario 64 one thing, it's one of the few collectathons I think is as fun to get to the end as it is to 100%. I talked about this last time when I ran through Crash Wrath of Cortex, but in a lot of games in this style, it can feel like there's a giant chunk of the game I'm missing out on, which makes me feel obligated to collect all the random glowy things in the pursuit of getting to the end fulfilled. 64 feels like it hits just the right amount of what's required to where you're having a complete experience, capping things off at 70 stars, but grabbing the remaining 50 still feels like going the extra mile. It's made even better that since every star is equal, which ones you choose to get are entirely in your hands. Think getting a certain star sucks and don't want to bother? Get a different one instead. One of my least favorite stages in the game is Tiny Huge Island, and assuming I'm not going for 100%, which I probably am, I can instead get stars elsewhere and completely ignore coming here. Take this thinking to the logical extreme. If you get every star in the entrance and basement plus some secret stars, you can potentially beat the game without even touching the levels on the second floor. The freedom in how you tackle the game is one of its greatest strengths in my mind, and if you want to say hyper, I thought you weren't going to talk about the obvious stuff. Well, yeah, I thought it was obvious too, but I guess some people didn't. Let me get into level design, because for grandfathering this genre of game, it manages to avoid most of the pitfalls a lot of its successors would get stuck in. For example, you know what I hate in my collectathons? Meandering, spaciousness for the sake of it, dragged out fetch quests, forced backtracking. This section is about Banjo-Tooie in case I was being too subtle about it. Mario 64 keeps itself compact and as to the point as possible. A good test I find for these types of games is, can I choose a random direction to run in and stumble on important collectibles? 64's levels stay mostly short form, allowing important material to be crammed into every corner. It never feels like there's any wasted space, which lets the game maintain a fast pace the whole way through. That's also helped by star objectives being very simple. Even the most complicated of stars should only take less than 5 minutes to grab. When they aren't sitting out in the open, it's usually stuff like defeat a simple boss, navigate this obstacle course, do something with an NPC. Again, it's very to the point, which works in the game's benefit. When you enter a stage, you're also given the star's title, which can help point you in the right direction sometimes. Like, yeah, when I see the name Foot Race with Koopa the Quick and suddenly I see a big Koopa Troopa near spawn, it's pretty obvious what's up here. But then there's others, like Secrets in Shallows and Sky. It's hard to tell what you're conveying here, and it's also misleading because none of the secrets are in the sky. These are secrets in box pushing. 64 is generally clear of a lot of the cryptic shit that you find in games back in the day, but every so often there's one. Any star that has secrets in the name involves finding invisible points you need to touch to make the star spawn, with the level of conveyance on where these points are ranging from collect the coins to none at all. One that always comes to mind is blast away the wall in Womp's Fortress. With all the fancy up-res graphics, I can see the little seam in the wall telling me I need to hit here, but I can't imagine that would come through on the original version of the game, especially if you were playing this on a CRT back in 1996, and it makes me wonder how people figure out how to blow up this specific corner. Granted, this doesn't really matter because I'm playing this in 2026 on an HD monitor, and in fact, a lot of this doesn't matter because a majority of people nowadays are going to know 64's deal with most of the cryptic stars, and if they don't, they've got the internet. This is just random thoughts that I had while playing the game. I mean, it doesn't really matter for me individually anyway. I've got the locations of every star in this game memorized. But you know, in hindsight, it's interesting to think about. One thing I gotta commend 64 for as well is the lack of backtracking, which is something a lot of collectathons from this time suffer from. It definitely has to do with the fact you don't unlock new moves from Mario as you progress. The most you have are these caps, but usually if a star requires a cap, you'll end up unlocking it around the same time you find the gate-kept star. The only exception I found was in Jolly Roger Bay, where you need the metal cap that you don't get until you unlock the basement, but even then you can skip it by simply swimming really good. I guess I can talk about the caps for a second. They're fine, they don't really change the gameplay much, and are usually only useful for getting their associated stars, be it sinking below water with the metal cap or going through walls with the vanish cap. The one that gets the best use is easily the wing cap. It's balanced similar to the cape feather in Mario World, where you can use it to fly over large portions of the level if you know what you're doing, but the flying itself is awkward and has a weird learning curve to compensate. When you get to grips with it, you can get around most platforming challenges with ease, but I imagine the devs knew this, which is why most levels don't even give you the option. The caps are fine for what they're used for, since I don't think this game needed traditional Mario power-ups. You don't need something like the Fire Flower, because enemies aren't a problem for the most part, and you don't need platforming power-ups like the Raccoon Leaf, because traversal's focused on your 50 different jumps. I'd argue the game's actually better for not having them, because you could easily glide or fly around most challenges, and it kinda undercut all the creative ways you can get around. I think there's a reason why the games with involved movement like 64, Sunshine, and Odyssey don't have power-ups. Meanwhile, the more traditionally structured games like the Galaxy and 3D duology brought them back, even if they do so in different ways. So, Mario 64's star collection system is solid in just about every way. Great, but there's still one problem to discuss that everyone's looked at unfavorably in modern times. Say hello to the boot-out system. I said Mario 64 had a fast pace, and while I still mostly stand by that, the boot-out system definitely hampers how fast that pace could, and arguably should, be. Let's use Wet Dry World as our point of reference, since it was one of the stages I cleared out the fastest. Getting all the stars took me roughly 11 minutes, and keep in mind that's slightly skewed because when I went for the red coins, I also did the 100 coin star, which is a whole layer of this discussion in of itself, but we'll put a pin in that for now. Of that 11 minutes, around 2 full minutes was used solely for going into the stage, choosing a star, doing the star grab animation, getting sent out, and then jumping back in. It was 20 seconds apiece, 6 times for each star, and it only becomes more noticeable the faster stages can be cleared out. The level design also doesn't complement it most of the time. In stages like Lethal Lava Land, the stage is so compact that each time you enter for a star, the difference amounts to walking 5 inches further than you did initially since all the stars are grouped so close together. Sometimes on platforms literally right next to each other. Meanwhile, others like Tall Mountain are these big climbs through the stage with stars placed at different points of the mountain, which ends up amounting to climbing a set distance, stopping, then restarting the climb going slightly further up this time. And again, I'd like to reiterate you're repeating that process 6 times until the stage is swept. Without getting booted out, I could just grab everything in one seamless trip to the top of the mountain, so it feels like the only reason the system exists is for the sake of padding. What's funny is that despite how Mario 64 feels ahead of a lot of the games that would follow it, in this one instance, it's behind when it really doesn't feel like it has to be. The game's fully capable of letting you collect stars while keeping you in the stage, and I know this because now's when I'm gonna take out that pin in the 100 coin stars. Now these feel like they get a bad rap, and while I get why, I actually want to come to their defense. 100 coin missions are cool, they feel like the perfect final test for each stage. You've done all the other missions, now use the knowledge you've gained on which areas have the most coins to collect 100 of them in one clean run. There's also other factors to consider, like blue coin switches, which can give a huge payout if all are collected. The main important distinction here for this discussion is that for 100 coin stars, and only for those stars, you can collect them without being kicked out of the stage. Why couldn't they all be like that? It makes these the most seamless stars to collect in the game. It feels so natural that I can grab all the red coins to help with getting 100 coins, and then once I'm done with that, I can wrap back around to get the red coin star, but this is the only time I can do something like this. Now let's be fair for a second. For a game on N64, some stars would pose a problem. Sometimes there will be one where an entire structure changes that would make it hard for the game to keep you in the level. Be it a giant tower after you beat King Womp, Bowser's submarine leaving, the pirate ship floating to the water's surface. Games around Mario 64's time didn't even do stuff like this regularly, so I can't imagine it keeping you in the level while generating these structures in real time. The only N64 game that I've seen do something like this is Banjo-Tooie again. That game keeps coming up. The thing is, not only did that game come a fair bit later, with developers that not only had a better idea of what the console's capable of and how to make a collectathon, the game is also crumbling under the weight of its own scope, so it's a real trooper. I do, however, have an idea on how to solve this. Simply make certain stars that cause big changes in the environment boot you out while the rest let you stay. This basically achieves the same effect as the game has currently without hampering the other stars that don't need it. Even then, this shouldn't be that big of a deal, because out of the game's 120 stars, only a measly 3 fall under this. As for outliers like stars with specific NPCs or sub-areas like the volcano or pyramid, the fix is simple. Have the NPCs always active, since stuff like Koopa the Quick or Cool Mountain Snowman don't have a reason to not be there. Meanwhile, in the case of the volcano and the pyramid, it could do something like, if the game detects you've gotten all the stars inside, it could take you out automatically. If not, the 2 easier solutions are just making the player exit the stage manually once they're done, or, actually add exits to these areas, because I'm not sure why they're one way to begin with. Either way, being able to stay in stages for longer periods of time at once would only improve the game as a whole. I know the conversation's changed by now, but I like to shift things back to 100 coin stars, because while I do like them more than most, and think they act as a good example of how star collection should have been handled, they're definitely not flawless. Some stages can be a bit stingy with coins, most notably Jolly Roger Bay and Dire Docks that only have just barely over 100, but considering the stages are easy to traverse and almost none of the coins are tied to enemies so you don't have to worry about losing any, it's not so bad. And on the bright side, no matter what, every stage has enough for the star. Again, I thought it was obvious too. That being said, be smart about where you finish your coin grind. I got a little nervous collecting the one on Tiny Huge Island because I thought it was gonna go through the grate at the top, cause yeah, the star always appears over your head dead just as you get the 100th coin, which could totally screw you over. Sometimes, depending on the level, if you don't capitalize on the blue coin switch and mess up killing some enemies, you could also be put in a tough spot. This run in Hazy Maze Cave went about as bad as it could have. I kinda messed up the switch because I didn't remember what turn to take, and I also lost a few enemy coins and pits. And by the end, I was scrambling for the last couple scraps I needed. The thing most likely to piss you off regarding these is that if you die, you go from the top, and in some of these stages, man... You know what, let's talk about them real quick, because I think it's funny that how enjoyable getting 100 coins is directly correlates to how fun the level itself is. Generally, I think everything in the opening floor and the basement is fun stuff. Bob-Omb Battlefields, Cool Mountain, and Womp's Fortress are all perfect introductory levels and immediately making impact, giving you plenty of space to roam around and flex your movement skills. Jolly Roger Bay and Dire Docks are the only dedicated water levels in this game, and considering how integral the game's movement is to its enjoyability, as I'll go into soon, you'd think 2 stages that dramatically restrict your movement would kinda suck, but nah, these are chill actually. Considering how hated most water levels are in platformers for being their first major appearance in 3D, I think the swimming was handled well. I'm never strapped for air, there's plenty of coins to restore health if I need it, and the sections that require swimming are never so precise that they don't work with the controls. They're also notable for having one of the best tracks in the entire game's soundtrack. Serene, explorative, and unfortunately only plays here and in one bonus stage. I absolutely love it. Mario 64's soundtrack is good all around and has some absolutely iconic themes, but funnily enough, I don't usually go back to this one individually because I kinda think every remix they've done of these songs that's coming a later Mario game eclipses it in some way. And hey, speaking of the game's soundtrack, who the hell composed this? Big Boo's Haunt is perhaps the funniest case of tonal whiplash I've seen in a Mario game since it made me have an existential crisis at the age of 10. After 4 levels of Bing Bing Wahoo, the game hits you with the cold water, and I think it's so funny that all the set dressing is made to be intimidating for the 5-year-olds playing this. Meanwhile, the threats to contend with are Big Eyeball and Funny Spider. It only got worse for Baby Hyper when he got hit with the classic Mario 64 piano jump scare. Nowadays, I wonder if this is supposed to be the mansion's version of a chain chomp since it's stuck on an invisible leash. This is also one of the easiest stages to me. It just being a house means you do more navigating than platforming, so the aesthetics all it really has going for it. Lethal Lava Land, from what I understand, is one of the less liked parts of this game, but I don't know, I'm kinda down with it. It's on the faster end of stages, which is always fun for me. I like seeing how fast I can blitz through them, but I also think the whole level consisting of lava makes you watch your step, making you place your jumps well while also not being as punishing as the later stages that consist entirely of bottomless pits. Hazy Maze Cave is basically a better Big Boo's Haunt. Not only does it have more platforming, but it being a maze, it takes better advantage of being a navigation-focused stage than it did. Shifting Sandland I used to really not like. Nowadays, it's fine. I don't have many thoughts on it. It's arguably on the more forgettable end of what the game offers, but it's nothing offensive either, and I can have a decent amount of fun here, so I'm okay with it. The higher floors, though, is where the game loses itself a bit for me, which I guess is fitting considering almost every Mario game that came before this, besides Mario World, also fell off at the back half. There's only 2 stages I completely like up here. Snowman's Land is neat, even if it's weirdly simple given its position in the game. It almost would have made more sense if it swapped placement with Cool Mountain. Funnily enough, the other level up here I like is Tick-Tock Clock, which might seem hypocritical given what I'm about to say, but here's the thing. First, it's easily the most unique level theme in the game, and as such the one that resonates the most with me, which Nintendo must have agreed with considering it got made into a track in Mario Kart DS. It has some of the most involved platforming with a lot of cool and varied hazards, and I think it's really awesome how depending on what number the clock's hand is on when you enter, the speed of the level changes. You can do some pretty fun challenges with this. One of my favorites is with the star right at the top of the level. Ordinarily, you need to have the stage moving so you can use the clock hand to get over to the thwomp. I find it more fun though to play with the stage pause, cause then you get to do some cool and tricky jumps to get there instead. It's not spotless, there's more tiny platforms here than average, which is something the game doesn't always do best with, I find. And there is a large pit in the center of the stage that's always praying you fall into it, but it does handle this aspect better than others. The stage is structured like a donut, platforms on the edges, giant hole in the middle, and with the level being more tall than it is wide, you'll still have a chance of landing on something if you fall down. Even if it's slim, it's better than most other stages it's grouped next to. The least offensive one is easily Wet Dry World, known for its alleged negative emotional aura. Yeah bro, your cartridge isn't haunted, that's called called playing a bad level. One of Mario 64's greatest strengths is in its dreamlike worlds. Even if they're simplistic by today's standards, they're still very striking, and likely why so many people hold them close despite the majority never appearing in another game. These are places that'll stick with you as powerful childhood memories, entering pyramid ruins for the first time, discovering undersea caverns, maneuvering through areas of trepidation, or even seeing scary-ass giant eels, but he didn't look like that on my first playthrough because I installed something wrong. Wet Dry World subverts this by posing the question, what if the level theme was concrete? Yeah, no shit, people hyper-focus on the skybox of this place. It's about the only interesting thing it has going on besides the weird underwater town. What's the deal with this place? The whole gimmick is you can raise and lower the water level, but having the water any higher than the literal bottom of the stage only blocks you off from random objects you might need to interact with for stars. There's nothing outright wrong with Wet Dry World, but it's easily the least interesting thing this game has to offer. You could remove it, and I don't think much would change. I already went into Tall Mountain's problem of making you repeat the mountain climb constantly, which is sad since I feel like I otherwise like this stage a lot, but by the time you're close to being done here, it's already become a slog. The stage that easily draws the most ire is Rainbow Ride, and yeah, for good reason. The whole stage is platforms above a pit, which is the easiest way to make simple tasks in this game annoying. But what I actually don't like is that your main method of getting around are these flying carpets. And since this is another stage with the do a climb to get a star and then do the same climb again for a different star gimmick, that means so much of your time here is spent waiting. You can imagine how absolutely delighted I was when I rode all the way up to the top of the level only to find out I couldn't get the star I came here for because I hadn't talked to the Bob-Omb that activates the cannon yet. Honestly, if all the climbing was done through manual platforming, I'd be willing to stand up for this one, but it's just so boring. I do think there's a sleeper pick for the worst stage in the game though, cause it's easily Tiny Huge Island. This completely flopped. It's supposed to be a cool take on Mario 3's Giant Land. Yes, I love Enemy but Big this time. Problem is, it sucks. You're able to enter the stage in two different forms, either Tiny or Huge Island, as you do, and the gimmick immediately falls flat on its face. You never want to be in the Huge Island. You're basically barred from exploring the entire rest of the stage, and are forced to run to the nearest pipe to switch over, which is located in the most inconvenient area of the entire level. Entering in the Tiny variant lets you explore the whole thing and immediately have access to wherever you might need for a star. The problem is the Tiny variant sucks to get around. There's a lack of footing, the small enemies are hard to get rid of and knock you back, most likely into a pit, and shout out to the back parts of the island that you literally never have to go to and are a complete death trap. I almost never end up back here and survive, and unfortunately for me, if I want a chance at the 100 coin star, I need to traverse this area. Couple that with it only having one interesting star where you fight Wiggler, I don't know why more people don't hate this place. We've gone through all the worlds the game has to offer, but Mario 64 is in an interesting position, where the sum of its parts all come together to complement one feature that it's most well known for. Arguably the aspect that makes and breaks this game and what shaped discussion around it the most in the modern day. It's what always brings people back and sets it apart from the rest of the 3D games, and it's the Mario 64 changed a lot, but I think what was most integral to its identity was the fact that jumping now wasn't limited to press the A button and watch the man go. Now it's side flips, wall jumps, back flips, triple jumps, dives, long jumps, and most importantly, breakdance kick. Mario 64 would still be good on its own, but I argue what really makes the game as fun as it is that you can move. Every time I revisit this game, it becomes a new think piece on how I can get to a certain star in a new way, how I can outmaneuver obstacles even more efficiently than I did before. It is genuinely freeing. It's insane to me considering how early it was made that Mario 64 decided to create one of the most expressive and flowing movement systems in a 3D platformer. There are multiple stars in this game I would argue are straight up less fun to do the intended way than it is to get creative with your jumps and skip the challenge. You consider your movement way more this way, and honestly, a lot of times figuring out what jumps I need to do where and how is usually more fun than whatever I'm supposed to be doing. Part of the reason why this works is that a surprising amount of attention was put into how the jumps at your disposal are balanced. Imagine for a second that you could perform any of your jumps whenever you wanted. That would be awful. There'd be no reason to use any of your arsenal, you'd just resort to using the triple triple jump at all times since it's the one that gives you the most height. What keeps the movement system in line is how sometimes you might not be able to do the jump you want. For example, the triple jump is the highest of what you can do, but you need an adequate amount of space to set up the first two jumps that lead into it. If you don't have that space, maybe the side flip is better, but even that one needs some room for you to run forward and snap back. So instead you can use the back flip, one of the only special jumps you can perform from a standstill, and even that's accounted for since you can't grab ledges or wall jump after a backflip. It makes doing cool maneuvers almost have this puzzle element to them. Like, I know what pieces are gonna let me reach the platform, I just need to figure out how to put them together so I can get the desired result. The movement is one of the most important parts that goes into making this game come together, but I feel like it all comes with the giant asterisk of when it works. I guess I'll start with the simplest one to explain. So wall jumps are probably the coolest thing to do in this game in my opinion. They link so perfectly into your other jumps and you can gain way more momentum using it here than other Mario games. The problem is that sometimes it doesn't feel like the game wants me to use it. In every Mario game after this that has the wall jump, you can do this wall slide. It's great at immediately indicating when you can wall jump and gives you more freedom in what timing you want to perform it with. 64 has its own way of doing things that occasionally pisses me off, where you basically have to jump as soon as you hit the wall, which is very finicky timing-wise. Sometimes it feels like I have decent leeway to do it, others it's like I have mere frames, and that's without even mentioning, if you jump at a wall while you're too close to it, you don't even get the chance to do the jump. There's an unspecified certain amount of distance away from the wall you need to be at first, and that's without mentioning you needing some speed going into the jump or it doesn't work at all, which is a whole other problem this game faces. The way I see Mario 64, it works best when you're either at a standstill or running at your fastest. Any of the speeds in between that is where things get wacky. It's where stuff like Mario not snapping the opposite direction and running a half circle happens, where side flips just stop working, where I bump into walls constantly and have my controls locked for a second, and a bunch of other random miscellaneous things that I don't really feel are important to get into. It's not horrible, but it has a weird little learning curve and honestly a lot of times doesn't feel super intuitive. That's without even mentioning the camera that's as likely to get stuck in invisible walls as it is to be shoved up Mario's ass. You either use the default camera that never seems to want to turn in the direction I want but has good preset angles, or you use the Mario cam that actually works as a camera but always feels just barely off from where I want it to be. And at this point I can only assume Lakigu's having an aneurysm off screen. Let me give you a bit of perspective here. When I first played the original Mario 64, it kinda really pissed me off. The game felt super clunky, annoying, and like it was trying to prevent me from being inventive with its moveset, especially by the time I was nearing the end. Obviously, my opinions changed, because I wouldn't be talking as highly of it if I still thought that. But that's after I've played 64 several times, where I experimented and learned all the quirks and how to get around them. And I feel like until you learn how it works, the controls just won't feel right. I can appreciate a lot of what 64's moveset brings to the table, and it does have the highest skill ceiling of any Mario game, because the stuff you can pull off here is dumbfounding, but until you understand how to steer this ship, it can feel like the game is actively fighting against you, and honestly, after having spent so much time playing this, and ROM hacks associated with it, no matter how much experience I have, it sometimes still kinda does. This is a bit of a side tangent, but I want to talk about something that comes up in discussions of 64 that I think is important, and that's legacy. Mario 64 was a genre-defining game, with expectation-shattering worlds and an innovative movement system. I won't take away that back in 1996, people must have thought we hit the ceiling, but I didn't play it in 1996 because sperm cells can't hold controllers. I'm playing this now, and while I think the impact it left can't be understated, it has been outdone. Not every time, mind you, but I think the Foundation 64 Rest song has been evolved and made better. Now, I'd never say I think 64 is a bad game, no, it's still very good. Every 3D Mario game is good. I know there's gonna be one person watching this that says Odyssey is bad. You're fine to think that. I think you're insane. I'd also argue out of all the 3D Marios, 64 was easily the most important. If I could only choose one 3D Mario game to have released, it'd have to be this one for how it affected the industry. But I think it's important to dissect, separate from that, how its successors have overcome it. And I think comparing the games' movement systems is the easiest way of showcasing that. That's all to say, even if he has the capacity to be extremely cool, I don't always like controlling Mario in this game because he lacks consistency, which is something every later iteration would be rock solid in. That's about everything Mario 64 has to offer, so what do we say we wrap things up here? Every so often, at certain star milestones, you'll be able to enter a special Bowser level to unlock a new part of the castle. These are the only main boss areas. You'll face face off with some bosses in the normal stages every so often, but they're nothing intricate. Ground pound the Womp King, smack eye rocks, eyeballs, push a baker's dozen worth of spheres into pits, and my favorite is Wiggler, who you take care of by literally jumping on him 3 times like he's a stack of Goombas in a trench coat. After I beat him, he's so embarrassed by his performance he killed himself in front of me, not his day. A cool part about the Bowser stages is that compared to the rest of what's here, they're structured far more like traditional Mario levels, and it makes me wish we had a 3D Mario game that's built like 3D World but moves like the Open trilogy. We need a name for these. The Bowser levels are great for speedrunning. If you're quick on your feet and with your fingers, you can constantly keep things moving and shift your momentum accordingly. Bowser in the Sky is the weakest of the 3. It's got a couple obstacles you're forced to wait for, and you gotta climb up several poles that break the pace. Dark World and Fire Sea are tons of fun though. While they occasionally have stuff you're meant to wait for, all it takes is acting quick and jumping good to fly past them. Couple that with taking some detours to grab 8 red coins, and honestly these feel like some of the best parts of the game. At the end, you have a fight with the big man himself, which is still simple, but more involved than the rest. Avoid attacks, grab him by the tail, and launch him into bombs, or like I did as a kid, slowly and kinda pathetically inch him towards a bomb. I could never beat the final boss back in the day because I absolutely sucked at timing my throws for that final hit, and even now I still sometimes find a way to fumble it, but miraculously I think I got it the fastest I ever have on this run. Bowser gets bombed, Peach gets rescued, the day is saved, and Mario finally gets to eat his giant birthday cake. I don't care what this game was actually about, that was the goal of me. The most pressing thing of all though, that reward for getting all 120 stars. You can go up to the roof. Yoshi's up here. Man, is he seeing better days. He gives you 99 lives, which is great for a game where your lives reset when you turn it off. Okay, but actually the funniest part of getting 100% is that one of the rewards is the shiny triple jump that makes it directly worse, since you can no longer do a wall jump out of your triple. That's incredible. Definitely keeping that full completion reward a lot more humble than later games will give you. I mean, it's better than a postcard, I guess. So that's the end of Mario 64. Yeah, it's good. I mean, like, what are we doing here? I definitely have some extra grievances with this game than most, and I probably don't come back to it as often as some, but my accolades weren't lies. This is a fantastic game that, for the most part, still holds up today, which is probably the most impressive feat it has to its name. I'm not gonna lie, I was worried going into this. As I alluded to at the start, everyone's talked about Mario 64, and I didn't exactly know what to say about it that wouldn't come off as redundant. Part of me thought about skipping this one entirely, cause compared to other 3D Mario games, this was the one I had the least unique to say about. Initially, I was doing this solely out of obligation, get it done so I can move on to the ones I'm more excited to talk about. But if I go in with that mindset, it can only come out bad. It's ironic, really. I mentioned earlier that I originally played Mario 64 for an old YouTube channel where I basically just did playthroughs. Back then, I always wanted to stand out and had no clue how to go about doing that, and I ended up quitting on it for multiple reasons, but most relevantly, I felt like another drop in the ocean and didn't know how to set myself apart. I think it's fitting that a Mario game was the one to teach me the lesson, even more so that I got the answer coming back to this game years later. It doesn't matter if I think I'm doing the same thing everyone else has, just try and enjoy myself and I'll find that special sauce. Even if not every level hits, even if I don't know how to start a video like this, even if the game breaks its own pace, even if I can't tell if I'm going anywhere with this, even if the game doesn't always work in my favor, even if I feel like I'm doing the same shit as everyone else, just have fun. There's plenty of fun to be had, and besides, that's what we're here for, right?